Millionaire widow buys homeless black man's life. You won't believe what happened next. Victoria Hargrave stood at the grand entrance of her mansion, the doors wide open, revealing the sprawling estate that had once been a home full of life and laughter. Now, the echo of her footsteps on the marble floors was the only sound that filled the vast space. Her late husband had passed away suddenly, leaving her with a fortune that she had never asked for, never wanted. She had everything one could dream of: luxury, comfort, and solitude. But what good were all those things when the one thing she craved most was the warmth of someone to share them with? She wandered through the house, brushing her fingers along the polished wood of the furniture, now covered in dust. The emptiness of it all pressed down on her chest, heavier than any diamond or mansion could ever be. Her husband had loved her, but in the years since his passing, the emptiness had only grown. Despite the riches that surrounded her, the life she led felt like a beautiful cage. What was the point of living in such grandeur if she had no one to share it with? If she couldn't find meaning in her life, what was it all for? Outside, the world turned on, indifferent to her despair. As she drove through the busy streets of the city, her eyes caught something that made her pause. On a cold bench near the park, a man sat hunched over, his clothes ragged, his face a mask of quiet desperation. Isaiah Carter, in his early 40s, looked every bit the part of the world's forgotten. His once promising career as an artist had been swallowed whole by the streets. The weight of his circumstances had aged him before his time. Rough hands that had never known luxury, eyes that held the deep sorrow of a man who had lost everything. He hadn't always been like this. Once Isaiah had dreams, big ones. His passion for art had brought him a glimpse of a life beyond poverty. But life had a way of taking away what little hope one had left. His family was gone. His friends had abandoned him long ago, and the world he had once believed in had shown its cruel face. The streets were his reality now, each day a struggle for survival, every night another cold, lonely experience. Still, the dream of creating something beautiful, something meaningful, never left him. It was on that park bench, where the wind bit at his exposed skin, that Victoria noticed him. She had driven past him dozens of times before, but today, something about him stopped her. It wasn't just his appearance. It was the look in his eyes, a look that seemed to say he had been forgotten by the world, just as she had been. For a brief moment, she felt a stirring inside her, a recognition of something both broken and yearning. There was something real in him, something that mirrored the emptiness inside her. Victoria stopped the car. Her hand shook slightly as she turned off the engine. She didn't know why she was doing this, but in that moment she knew she couldn't just drive past him as she had every other time. She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement, and walked toward him. Isaiah looked up, startled. He wasn't used to anyone, least of all someone like her, acknowledging his existence. She stopped a few feet away, her gaze not judgmental but soft. "You look like someone who's been forgotten," she said, her voice gentle but filled with an urgency that surprised them both. Isaiah blinked, confused. Was she talking to him? Was he dreaming? "What do you want?" "I want to make you an offer," she replied, hesitating. The words were foreign to her, but they felt right. "I've been lost for a long time. I have everything anyone could dream of, but it doesn't mean anything. I want to help you. I want to buy your life, not as a transaction, but as a chance for both of us to change. I have a home, a family I've lost, and I think you could help me find meaning in it again." Isaiah frowned, his mind racing. "What are you talking about? What do you mean by my life?" "I'll take care of you," she said, her voice steady. "Clothes, shelter, food, everything you need. But in return, I want you to help me see the world beyond the wealth I've surrounded myself with. I want you to help me remember what it means to truly live, to care about something real. I need something genuine, something that isn't just about money." Isaiah stared at her, trying to process what she had said. He'd been homeless for years, always on guard, always fighting for the next meal or the next place to sleep. He had learned not to trust people, especially not people like her, rich, privileged, and seemingly untouchable. But there was something in her eyes, something that made him hesitate. Was this a chance? Or was he making a mistake, trusting someone who had no idea what his life had been like? He looked down at the worn jacket he had been wearing for months, the one that had seen better days. A life that seemed so far from this woman's world. Could he really accept her offer? Could he risk it all? A part of him wanted to say no, to walk away and keep his distance. But another part of him, the part that still dreamed of something better, whispered that maybe this could be his chance. As they stood there, the noise of the city buzzing around them, Isaiah felt a pull inside him, one that he hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, this was his moment. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it. But I don't know how you'll handle what you're asking for." Victoria smiled, relief and hope flooding through her. "I don't need to know how. I just need to know if you're willing to try. And maybe we'll both find what we've been searching for." They walked toward the car, but as Isaiah glanced back at the park bench, something in his chest tightened. Was he really ready for what was to come? Could this strange offer truly change their lives, or would it bring them closer to the edges of the unknown? Victoria's car cruised down the road, the city lights reflecting off the windows as they headed to her mansion. Isaiah sat in the passenger seat, unsure of how to feel. The smooth leather of the seat felt foreign beneath him, and the comfort of the car's warmth was a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving streets he had spent so many years on. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. A part of him wondered if he was making a mistake, trusting a woman he barely knew. But another part of him felt something stirring, a faint glimmer of hope he hadn't felt in years. As they pulled into the driveway of her mansion, Isaiah couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the sheer opulence. The sprawling estate seemed to stretch endlessly, with fountains and meticulously manicured gardens. It was everything he had never had, and everything he had never wanted until now. The thought of being here in this place of wealth and excess felt both exciting and suffocating. What was he supposed to do now? What did she expect from him? Victoria glanced over at him, her face a mix of anticipation and unease. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "I know this is a lot, but I promise you, I'm not doing this to control you. I just want to make a difference in both our lives." Isaiah nodded, but his heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure what to expect. He had spent years surviving on his own, never letting anyone in. Now here he was, about to step into a world that seemed so foreign, so far removed from everything he had ever known. Could he really allow himself to trust her? Could he let go of the walls he had built around himself? They entered the mansion, and Isaiah's senses were immediately overwhelmed. The house smelled faintly of lavender and dust, the faint sound of classical music drifting from the speakers in the background. The grandeur of the place was almost oppressive. High ceilings, antique furniture, and massive windows that overlooked the expansive grounds. Everything was pristine, carefully curated to perfection. And yet, it all felt empty. Victoria led him through the house, her heels clicking on the polished floors as she spoke, her voice a calming presence in the otherwise quiet space. "I know this might feel strange," she said, stopping in front of a large staircase, "but I want you to feel like this is your home too. I don't want to be alone here anymore, and I want you to feel like you belong. I've been stuck for so long. I need something real, and you need a chance." Isaiah stood at the bottom of the staircase, his mind swirling with questions. He wanted to say something, to ask her what she truly expected of him, but the words wouldn't come. He was so used to people wanting something in return for their kindness, so used to being taken advantage of. He had never met anyone like her before. "I don't know if I belong here," he muttered under his breath. "I've never belonged anywhere." Victoria turned to him, her gaze soft but steady. "That's what I'm offering you, a place to belong. Not because you owe me anything, but because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." As they continued through the house, Isaiah felt a strange sense of unease settle over him. There was a part of him that wanted to believe her, to embrace the idea of a fresh start. But another part of him, the part that had been hardened by years of struggle, refused to let his guard down. He had been let down too many times before. How could he be sure this was real? How could he trust someone who lived in a world so far removed from his own? Later that evening, after a quiet dinner where the two of them barely exchanged more than a few words, Victoria led Isaiah to a guest bedroom that had been prepared for him. The room was elegant, with soft linens and a large bed that seemed almost too luxurious to sleep in. Isaiah stood at the threshold, unsure of what to do. He had never been given anything like this before, never had a space that was his own, a place to rest without worry. "You can sleep here tonight," Victoria said gently, standing just outside the door. "I'll give you some time to settle in. Tomorrow we'll start fresh. You don't have to rush anything." Isaiah nodded, but as she walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being swallowed by the emptiness of this place. There was something unsettling about all the wealth surrounding him, something that made him feel small and insignificant. Was he really ready for this? Was he really willing to let go of his old life? He sat down on the edge of the bed, his hands gripping the fabric of his jacket. He had always believed that the world was cruel and unforgiving, that no one truly cared. And yet, here he was, in a mansion with a woman who seemed genuinely concerned for him. Could this be the chance he had been waiting for? Or was this just another cruel twist of fate, a brief moment of kindness before the inevitable crash? As he lay back on the bed, staring at the ornate ceiling above, Isaiah allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to hope, just a little, but that hope came with a price. The questions still lingered, unresolved and heavy in his mind. Could he trust her? Could he trust himself? The following morning, the house felt quieter than before, the heavy silence broken only by the soft hum of the world outside. Isaiah woke to the soft rays of the sun streaming through the large windows, casting a golden glow across the room. For a brief moment, he thought he had been dreaming. The luxury of the bed beneath him, the plush sheets that felt like silk against his skin, seemed so distant from the hard ground he had grown used to. But as the reality of his situation settled in, so did a sense of discomfort. He stood up, glancing around the room. Everything about the space was meticulously arranged. Furniture, artwork, the thick carpet underfoot, all foreign, all a world away from the grime of the streets. He tried to push away the feeling of being an intruder, of not belonging in this perfect, curated life. The dissonance between his world and hers was palpable. Downstairs, Victoria was already up, moving gracefully through the kitchen as the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Her movements were fluid, confident, but today there was a sense of heaviness in the air. She glanced up when Isaiah entered, offering a warm smile that seemed to reach her eyes. "I made breakfast," she said, her voice inviting but gentle, like she was trying to offer a semblance of normalcy. "I thought we could talk about what comes next." Isaiah hesitated, his stomach tight. The offer seemed too perfect, too easy. A part of him still couldn't believe it. "What comes next?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "I'm not sure what this all means. You're giving me a place to stay, food to eat, but I don't know if I'm supposed to do something for you in return. What do you really want from me?" Victoria set the coffee down on the table and sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. She had expected this question, but it still hit her harder than she anticipated. She had been so focused on her own emptiness, her own quest for meaning, that she had never fully considered the emotional weight this arrangement might place on Isaiah. He wasn't just a charity case. He was a person with a past, with pride, and with a lifetime of wounds that she couldn't see. Not yet. "I'm not asking for anything in return," she said, her voice calm but laced with a deeper vulnerability than Isaiah had heard before. "But I do want you to know that you don't owe me. I know that this offer might seem strange. It might feel like I'm trying to save you, but I'm not. I just want to be part of something real again. And maybe you need that too." Isaiah looked at her, his gaze softening, but there was still skepticism in his eyes. "I don't know how this is going to work," he muttered, pushing his coffee cup away, not feeling hungry. "I've spent so long fighting for survival that I don't know how to just let go. I don't know how to accept help, and I don't know if I can trust you." Victoria's heart ached at his words. She had imagined this moment, knew that this journey would be messy, complicated, and full of doubt. But hearing it from him, seeing the pain behind his eyes, made her realize just how far apart their worlds were. She had no idea how to bridge that gap. "I understand," she said, her voice tinged with empathy, "but I'm not going to force you to do anything. You don't have to let go of everything at once. Just take your time. You can leave if you want to. No one's making you stay." Isaiah didn't answer right away. He pushed his chair back and stood up, staring out the window at the garden beyond. He felt like a fish out of water in this place, and despite her words, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to lose himself entirely. He had spent so long relying on no one but himself. And now, here was a woman offering him everything, asking for nothing in return. But that in itself made him nervous. He wasn't used to kindness that came with no strings attached. "I'll try," he finally said, turning back to her, his voice raw with uncertainty. "But I can't promise it will be easy." Victoria gave him a small nod, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. "I'm not asking for promises, just your presence, and maybe over time we'll find something worth fighting for." As the day wore on, Victoria showed Isaiah around the house, introducing him to the staff and giving him the space he would need. It was all so strange to him, being waited on, being treated like someone of importance. For years he had been invisible, a shadow passing through the city, unnoticed and forgotten. Now he was being seen. and that visibility made him uneasy. Later that afternoon, Isaiah stood in front of a large canvas in one of the mansion's many rooms. The walls were lined with expensive art, but his gaze was fixed on the blank space in front of him. Art had always been his escape, his way of expressing everything he couldn't say. The paintbrush felt awkward in his hand, as if he had forgotten how to create, but he forced himself to make the first stroke, then the second. Slowly, as the hours passed, he found himself lost in the flow, his mind silencing the doubts and fears that had plagued him for so long. Victoria, watching him from the doorway, smiled softly. She didn't disturb him, not wanting to intrude on this small moment of peace, but she knew this was a crucial step for him, a chance to rediscover his identity, his voice in a world that had taken both from him. Days turned into weeks, and Isaiah's initial resistance slowly started to fade, but the sense of unease never quite left him. The mansion became a strange kind of prison, luxurious and suffocating all at once. Every corner seemed to hold expectations, and every passing day felt like he was being measured against some unspoken standard. No matter how many meals Victoria provided, no matter how many rooms he wandered through, Isaiah still couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he didn't belong here. Not in this life, not in this world. Victoria, on the other hand, seemed to be trying her hardest to make him feel at ease. She invited him to join her for walks in the garden, encouraged him to explore the town nearby, and even arranged for an art exhibition for him at a local gallery. The exhibition was a huge success, bringing in art lovers and critics alike, all drawn to the raw emotion in Isaiah's work. For the first time in years, Isaiah felt the stirrings of pride as he watched people stand in awe of his creations. But that pride was always followed by a quiet discomfort. As much as he had yearned for recognition, being seen now felt like a spotlight he didn't know how to handle. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Isaiah curled in a chair with a book, Victoria on the sofa across from him, her gaze distant. Isaiah broke the silence. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly, the words hanging heavy in the air. Victoria looked up, startled by the abruptness in his voice. "What do you mean?" Her voice was soft, trying to reach him, trying to understand. "I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not," he said, his eyes dark with frustration. He gestured around the room, his voice tight. "This life isn't me. I don't fit here. I'm not the man you think I am." Victoria stood and walked toward him, her footsteps light but determined. "Isaiah, you don't have to be someone else. You're here because I believe in you. You don't have to change anything." He stood up, pacing now, the restlessness inside him too powerful to contain. "It's not about changing for you. It's about me feeling like I'm losing myself in all this." He stopped in front of her, his eyes wild with emotion. "I've spent my whole life just surviving. Now that I'm here, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know who I am anymore. And that scares me." Victoria reached out to him, her voice steady and calm despite the rising tide of tension. "You don't have to know everything right now. You've been through so much, Isaiah. I understand that you're struggling. But this," she motioned to the life they were building, "this is a chance to find out who you really are, not who you were. It's a fresh start. A chance for both of us." He shook his head, frustration and pain bubbling to the surface. "A fresh start. A fresh start doesn't erase the past. It doesn't take away the years of fighting just to survive. It doesn't make me forget that I was invisible for so long." Victoria felt a pang in her chest at his words. She had tried so hard to offer him a new life, but she couldn't force him to embrace it. This was a journey he had to take on his own terms, but how could she help him if he refused to take the first step? "I know you're angry, and I understand why," she said softly, "but we can't keep holding on to the past. Not forever. We can only move forward. I'm here to walk that path with you, but you have to let go of the pain that's holding you back." Isaiah turned away, his face a mask of tension. "You don't get it," he muttered. "You've never had to fight for every inch of your life like I have. You've never had to wake up every day wondering if today's the day you'll finally lose everything." Victoria stepped closer, gently taking his arm. Her touch was light, almost tentative, as if she was afraid he might pull away. "I can't understand everything you've been through, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to help you find a way out of this. Out of all this pain." Isaiah pulled away, his anger flaring, but his voice broke when he spoke again. "What if I don't want to let go? What if the past is all I have left? What if I'm too broken to ever be fixed?" Victoria's heart cracked at the rawness of his pain. "Isaiah," No one is asking you to be fixed. You're not broken. You're human. And being human means you don't have to carry all that weight alone anymore. He looked at her, his eyes searching hers for something he couldn't find. And for the first time, he felt an almost desperate urge to break free of the walls he had built. But fear, deep, paralyzing fear, held him back. He had lived in darkness for so long. Could he step into the light, or would the weight of his past drag him down? As the evening wore on, the tension between them lingered, thick in the air, but there was something else too. Something unspoken. A crack in the walls, a hint of possibility that had begun to grow despite all the doubts and fears. Victoria wasn't giving up on him. And in that moment, Isaiah realized that maybe he didn't have to give up on himself either. The days that followed the confrontation were marked by silence. Both Isaiah and Victoria retreated into their separate worlds, the weight of their words lingering between them like a storm cloud that refused to break. Isaiah spent hours in the art room, creating frantically, his brushstrokes wild and filled with emotion. He had always used art as a way to process his pain, but now it felt like he was painting through a fog. Nothing seemed to come out right. No matter how many colors he splashed across the canvas, he couldn't escape the suffocating tension in his chest. Victoria, on the other hand, was no better. She busied herself with charity events, meetings, and gallery exhibitions, always in motion, always avoiding the quiet that came when she had to face herself. She couldn't help but feel a deep, unspoken guilt that lingered in her heart. She had wanted to help Isaiah so badly, but the harder she tried to pull him out of his darkness, the more he seemed to retreat into it. One evening, after a long day of pushing herself to keep busy, Victoria found herself standing in the garden, staring at the moon. The air was cool and the flowers were beginning to wilt as the season changed, but the peaceful quiet gave her a moment of clarity. She knew that no amount of material wealth or grand gestures could fix what was broken inside both of them. She couldn't force Isaiah to heal. She couldn't fix her own loneliness with him either. It wasn't fair to either of them. As she stood there, lost in thought, Isaiah appeared at the gate, his steps slow and hesitant, as though unsure if he had the right to be there. He looked different than the man who had arrived weeks ago. His clothes, though still simple, were a little neater, his shoulders a little less hunched, but there was still a shadow over him, a shadow that wouldn't lift no matter how much he painted, no matter how many meals Victoria had shared with him. Without a word, he walked up to her, stopping just a few feet away. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the flowers at his feet. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm, "about everything you've said, about why I'm here. And I realized something." Victoria turned toward him, her heart skipping a beat. "What did you realize?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Isaiah took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. He was no longer the angry, defensive man who had stormed through the mansion just days ago. There was a sense of quiet acceptance in him now, but the weight of his words still hung heavy. "I realized that I've been letting my past define me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "All these years of pain and struggle, they've been controlling everything I do. I've been stuck, refusing to let go because I didn't think I deserved anything better." Victoria stepped closer, her heart aching for him. "Isaiah, you don't have to carry that alone anymore." "I know," he said, his voice faltering, "but I also know that it's not just about me. You can't fix me, Victoria, and I can't fix myself. I've been so angry at the world for what it did to me, but maybe I've been angry at the wrong things. Maybe I need to stop fighting and just let go. Not of the past, but of the grip it has on me. And maybe, just maybe, we can start over. Both of us." Victoria felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. She had always thought that her loneliness and her grief could be solved by helping someone else. But now she realized that helping Isaiah wasn't about fixing him. It was about helping him rediscover his strength, his worth, his humanity. And in the process, she had rediscovered her own. "You're right," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You don't need to be fixed. You're enough just as you are." Isaiah met her gaze for the first time in what felt like ages. The weight of everything that had passed between them hung in the air, but there was a sense of peace settling in as they stood there together. For the first time, Isaiah felt like he could truly breathe again. "I'm not sure what the future holds," he said softly, "but I'm willing to find out with you." Victoria smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We'll figure it out together." For the first time since she had met him, Victoria felt a sense of relief, a moment of clarity that told her she wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. They were both lost, but they were finally on the same path, ready to take the next step together. The days that followed brought a sense of calm between Victoria and Isaiah, but that calm was fragile, like the first blooms of spring that were still vulnerable to the cold of night. Together, they began to explore what it meant to truly live again. Isaiah, while still carrying the weight of his past, found solace in the small moments, the way the sun filtered through the trees in the garden, the feeling of a paintbrush gliding across canvas, and the warmth of a simple meal shared with someone who didn't see him as a project, but as a person. Victoria, too, found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. With Isaiah, she began to rediscover the joy of simple things, an evening walk through the garden, a cup of tea shared without words. Her house, once a symbol of wealth and isolation, began to feel like a home again. There was laughter in the halls, and slowly the walls she had built around her heart started to come down. But life, as it always does, had a way of throwing unexpected challenges into their path. It started subtly, Isaiah becoming distant during their moments together, retreating into the studio for longer periods, his work becoming more intense, almost frantic. Victoria noticed the change, but she didn't press him, respecting his space, believing that the struggles of his past still haunted him. What she didn't expect was the sudden appearance of a figure from Isaiah's life, someone from his past, someone who threatened to unravel everything they had begun to build together. It was a chilly afternoon when the knock came at the door. Victoria had been in the kitchen preparing lunch when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find a man standing there, tall, well-dressed, and with a confident air that immediately put her on guard. His sharp suit and polished demeanor were a stark contrast to Isaiah's worn clothes and the vulnerability she had come to know. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the man said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "But I'm looking for Isaiah Carter." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. "He's not here right now. May I ask who you are?" The man smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Malcolm Harris. I'm an old acquaintance of Isaiah's. We used to work together." Victoria's mind raced. Isaiah had never mentioned anyone by that name. He had told her little about his past, and what he had shared was fragmented, pieces of a story that didn't seem to make sense. She felt a twinge of unease, but she kept her voice steady. "I see," she said, trying to mask her concern. "Well, I'll let him know you stopped by." Malcolm's smile widened, but there was something predatory in it. "Please do. I'm sure Isaiah will be eager to see me again. It's been a long time." Victoria watched as he turned and walked away, his steps confident and purposeful. As soon as he was out of sight, her mind began to race. Who was this man? And why had Isaiah not mentioned him? The fact that he had claimed to work with Isaiah made her uneasy. She had always sensed there was more to Isaiah's past than he was willing to share. But this felt different. When Isaiah returned that evening, Victoria didn't waste any time. "Someone came by today," she began, her voice measured but laced with concern. "A man named Malcolm Harris. He said he used to work with you." Isaiah froze, his expression shifting from casual to something darker. "I don't want to talk about him." Victoria, sensing the immediate tension, stepped closer. "Isaiah, I need to know. Who is he? Why didn't you tell me about him?" For a moment, Isaiah said nothing, his eyes clouded with memories he didn't want to face. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but edged with bitterness. "Malcolm is someone from a time I wish I could forget," he said, his words heavy with regret. "He was part of the reason I ended up on the streets. He doesn't care about me. He never did. He only wants one thing: control." Victoria's heart sank as she listened, piecing together the fragments of Isaiah's past she had never truly understood. "What do you mean by control?" Isaiah ran a hand through his hair, frustration and pain written across his face. "Malcolm and his company were the ones who took everything from me. My job, my reputation, my family. He played a part in ruining my career, and in the end, he made sure I had nothing left. He thought he could buy me, control me, and when I walked away, when I left everything behind, he made sure I paid for it." Victoria reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry, but you don't have to go back to that. You don't owe him anything anymore." Isaiah shook his head, his jaw tightening. "It's not that simple. He's not going to leave me alone. He's already made it clear that he wants something from me, something I can't give, and now he's here, ready to destroy what little peace I've found." Victoria felt the weight of his words sink in. She had thought their struggles were over, that they had reached a place of understanding and healing, but now she realized that Isaiah's past wasn't something that could be left behind so easily. It had followed him here, and now it threatened to tear apart the fragile life they had started to build. "Isaiah, we'll face this together," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let him destroy everything we've worked for." But deep down, Victoria knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The ghosts of Isaiah's past had returned, and the battle for his freedom was far from over. The following days felt like a strange, suffocating fog. Malcolm's visit had cast a shadow over everything Isaiah and Victoria had started to rebuild. Isaiah spent long hours in the studio, avoiding any further conversations about Malcolm, but the tension between him and Victoria was palpable. She could sense that he was retreating into himself, the walls he had so carefully started to tear down now rising higher than ever before. Victoria, for her part, tried to remain patient. She knew Isaiah needed space to process his past, but every passing day made her feel further removed from the man she had started to understand. She had offered him kindness and support, but now she realized it wasn't just him who was struggling. It was both of them. The weight of his past wasn't just his to carry, it was now part of their shared reality. One afternoon, after a particularly tense breakfast, Isaiah finally spoke, his voice rough with frustration. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." Victoria stood still, her heart heavy with the fear that he was about to push her away again. "Isaiah, please," she said, her voice soft, pleading. "You don't have to go through this alone. Whatever you're facing, we can face it together." But Isaiah was shaking his head, the frustration and pain clear on his face. "You don't get it. You don't understand what this man is capable of. I've spent years running from him. I've made sure he couldn't touch me, couldn't destroy me, but now he's here, and I don't know how to keep him away." Victoria stepped forward, her voice steady and filled with quiet resolve. "We'll figure this out. I don't know who Malcolm is, but I know that you don't have to face him alone. I'm not going anywhere." Isaiah looked at her, the raw emotion in his eyes threatening to spill over. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. You're offering me something I can't give back, and I don't know if I can ever repay you for everything you've done for me." Victoria placed her hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "You don't need to repay me, Isaiah. You don't have to prove anything to me. What you've given me already is more than enough." The sincerity in her words struck him deep, and for a moment he allowed himself to feel the weight of her support. It was a lifeline he hadn't known he needed, one that offered him the chance to let go of the heavy burden he had carried for so long. But the fear of Malcolm's return still clung to him, like an anchor tied to his heart. "I don't know how to fight him," Isaiah whispered, his voice full of vulnerability. "He's always had control over me. He's always been one step ahead. How can I fight that?" Victoria took a deep breath, steadying herself before she spoke. "We're not fighting him alone. We'll take it one step at a time. We'll find a way to get through this together." Isaiah looked at her, the flicker of hope in his eyes slowly replacing the fear. "I don't know what that looks like yet," he said softly, "but I'm willing to try." Victoria nodded, her hand still resting on his shoulder. "That's all I'm asking. We'll figure it out. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side." That night, as the mansion settled into silence, Isaiah found himself standing in front of the canvas again. His brush moved across the surface with purpose, each stroke bringing him closer to something he couldn't quite understand. The act of creation, once an escape, now felt like a way to confront the chaos swirling within him. For the first time, he wasn't just painting to forget. He was painting to remember, to reclaim his identity, his voice, and the man he had been before everything had been taken from him. Victoria, watching him from the doorway, felt a sense of quiet pride. She had always known Isaiah had the strength within him, even when he couldn't see it himself. And as he continued to paint, she realized that maybe this was the first step toward healing, not just for him, but for both of them. The next morning, Isaiah stood in front of the canvas once more, his eyes fixed on the nearly finished piece. He could feel the weight of the past still there, still lingering like a shadow at the edges of his consciousness. But now, he knew he wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. Days passed, and with each one, the tension between Isaiah's past and present grew. The looming presence of Malcolm had never fully left, but now Isaiah and Victoria were preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Victoria had been relentless, gathering information, making calls, and seeking legal counsel to help Isaiah confront the man who had tried to destroy him. But Isaiah, despite his progress, still felt the weight of his past bearing down on him, pulling him back into a place of helplessness he had fought so hard to escape. It was a grey afternoon when the doorbell rang again, and this time Victoria's heart sank when she saw the familiar figure standing at the threshold. Malcolm was back. Isaiah stood at the top of the stairs, his gaze locked on the door. The pounding in his chest was a reminder of all the years he had spent running from this moment, from this man. He had thought that being away from the streets would mean freedom. He had thought that finding peace with Victoria would be enough to outrun the demons of his past. But Malcolm was here, standing in front of the life he had tried so hard to build. Victoria answered the door, her voice steady but firm. "Malcolm, I thought we were clear about this." Malcolm's smile was cold, calculating. "We were, Victoria. But you see, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Isaiah. He and I have unfinished business." Isaiah descended the stairs slowly, his body tense. The sight of Malcolm made his stomach churn, his instincts screaming at him to retreat. But he couldn't. Not this time. Not after everything he had fought for. "Unfinished business?" Isaiah's voice was low, tinged with anger and resolve. "You've had your fun, Malcolm. You've taken everything from me. But I'm not the same man I was when you left me on the streets. You don't have control over me anymore." Malcolm's eyes flicked to Victoria, then back to Isaiah, his smile tightening. "You think you're free, don't you? That this life of luxury is going to save you. But you'll always be mine, Isaiah. You'll always be the man I made you. No amount of paint or fancy dinners can change that." Isaiah stepped forward, his chest rising with each breath. "You don't get to decide who I am, I do." Victoria stood beside him now, her presence unwavering. "You don't own him anymore, Malcolm, and you don't own me either. We're done with you." The words hung in the air, a heavy declaration that seemed to shake the very foundation of the mansion. Malcolm's expression faltered, just for a moment, as if he hadn't expected such defiance. But then, with a flick of his wrist, his smile returned, though it was tinged with something darker. "You think you can just walk away from me?" Malcolm asked, his voice dripping with venom. "I built you, Isaiah. I gave you everything, and I can take it all away again." Isaiah took a step closer, his eyes burning with a fire he hadn't felt in years. "No, you didn't build me. You broke me, and I've rebuilt myself from the ground up. You're not a part of my life anymore." Malcolm's gaze flickered, his eyes narrowing. He was used to being in control, used to manipulating people into submission. But something in Isaiah's voice, something raw and unshakable, made him realize that he was no longer the same man. Isaiah had fought for his freedom, and now he was standing on the edge of reclaiming it. "You may think you've won," Malcolm spat, "but I'm not done yet. I'll be back. You can't escape me forever." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the house, leaving behind nothing but the coldness of his words. The tension in the air lingered, but it was different now. The weight of his presence had been lifted. Isaiah exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace, a peace that came from finally standing up to the man who had tormented him for so long. He turned to Victoria, his expression softening. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Victoria smiled, stepping closer and placing her hand on his. "You didn't have to do it alone. You never will again." Isaiah took a deep breath, his gaze drifting to the window, where the first rays of sunlight pierced the grey clouds. The storm had passed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, Isaiah felt ready to face whatever came next. The past no longer had a hold on him, and for the first time he truly believed that he could walk forward, side by side with Victoria, into a future that was his to create.